It does this stupid little like shoulder sway.
It's like it's like a shoulder sway.
But it's the same one every time.
It's like every middle schooler at a middle school dance. It's that dance. Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies.
My name is Mikiah.
And I'm Kyle. By Great American Movies, this week, maybe skip it if you're looking for something like a Chinatown or an Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yeah, a little bit more divisive here in terms of its potential greatness.
A little bit more polarizing. Yeah, the greatness is questionable at best. But this is a Movie of the Week style podcast where we take turns picking films and we have a casual discussion about their context and quality.
If you prefer us in audio formats, this is primarily an audio show. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
So this week, I selected Sucker Punch, which is one of Zack Snyder's first movies, and it was his first creative work where he was the primary writer and director for it. But Sucker Punch follows Baby Doll, who is played by Emily Browning, who, after getting put into an institution from her father after getting abused, plans an escape with some of the other girls in the institution, but in order to do so, she must first escape into her mental fantasies. It's a nice way of putting it, because this movie follows quite a few interesting topics, I would say.
Yeah, the actual plot of this movie is extremely simple.
Very.
But then the way the plot is represented is what is more complicated.
And confusing, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's definitely not one of the easier concepts to get around.
Right.
But this movie did make $89.7 million on a $82 million budget, which is not great.
That's a disaster right there.
That's a disaster.
Yeah. That's
especially for, I think, the production company was Legendary Pictures, I think. Which
and Warner
was
Brothers,
at the time more so independent than it was one of the bigger hitters. So
they were becoming what they were,
up and coming. Yeah,
Legendary did produce the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy as well as Inception, and then it's before they got into like their Godzilla universe of films, though, where that's kind of like their big franchise now. But
right. It's kind of funny because this is the movie immediately preceding Zack Snyder's entrance to the franchise game with the DCEU. So it's funny that the last taste before going into Man of Steel was this.
Right. Which they kind of ignored that in like the marketing and everything. It was one of those things where it's like from the director of 300 and Watchmen, and it did not say
the Guardians, the Legends,
or the
Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
Yeah, he had done the Guardians of Ga'Hoole at that point as well. But
yeah, I mean, 300 was a moderate success, and Watchmen I don't think made a lot of money at the box office, but it was critically, I think, a success.
Watchmen? I mean, Zack Snyder's never made a film that was like 100% like critics are all on board with it. I think every film he's made is divisive to some extent. And has been. This one in particular had its lowest critic ratings out of any of them. This one I couldn't say that critically this was divisive. This was just bad as far as like the critical the critical reception to it was just
the public reception bad. Especially is the worst of his movies, I'd say. Easily.
I'd agree with that.
Which is weird because this is one of his like when I think of a Zack Snyder movie, it's basically Watchmen and this, because those two movies specifically are kind of him at his just peak of what people know him for. It's a bit like Dark Man with Sam Raimi. Yeah, Zack Snyderiness. Because I mean, this movie, you commented that it was that it's almost 2 hours to me, but without all the slow-mo, probably would have been like 40 minutes. So,
well, if you're me,
that's typical
it's over
for a Zack Snyder movie.
If you're me, it's over 2 hours because okay, I'm gonna say I am not a Zack Snyder fan. We've established that on this show before. Just doesn't do it for me. I do not gel with this man's filmmaking sensibilities at all, really. He has a few films, just a couple that I've enjoyed, but so I'm not like against the man entirely. I'm not going to hate it just because he made it. So I'm open to it. And being open to it, I was like, okay, there is an extended edition of this film that the fans of the film swear is the superior version of it.
Oh, please tell me you didn't watch that version.
I said to myself, well, if I'm only going to watch this movie one time.
Oh, no.
Then I'm going to watch the version of it that people seem to prefer. So I watched the extended edition, which is a full 18 minutes longer.
It's basically just 18 minutes more of this. It's
so,
not...
Yeah, nobody could say I didn't give it a shot. Hearing what I have to say about it, I definitely gave this movie a shot. I want to like every movie I watch. And I don't have anything against Zack Snyder. I feel like he is a guy that seems like a really nice guy, which if I'm talking about
artist versus art. The reason he dropped out of Justice League was a very personal issue. I have no problem with him dropping out of Justice League and that kind of thing. Him taking time off.
Too, like
I'm going to critique his movies.
Yeah, everything that he's done for his fans, the way he interacts and engages with his fan base, what he seems to say his movies are about. I really believe that he stands behind what he says his movies are about, such as this. I just think the man's a bad storyteller. The man cannot write meaningful narrative and meaningful characters. And this movie being completely from his mind, he has a co-writer on the script.
Steve Shibuya.
Steve Shibuya. But it really is.
If nothing else,
Zack Snyder's idea.
It's a fun name to say. But he's not really known for much else, so I assume it was mostly Zack.
Right. So I'm probably just somebody to help him like craft his ideas into a cohesive script,
right?
Which you can argue about, but
yeah, you can argue with the cohesiveness. It is a script.
Yeah. So, because he's presented this as almost a feminist manifesto, basically. And I'm like,
I don't know if I would agree with that, but I can see how people would understand that.
The way that Zack Snyder has talked about it, he really seems
I don't know anything about that, so I could be totally wrong about the way that he's presented this. I think in the film it doesn't seem like that, but if he brought it up in interviews as like what you say, then first of all, I absolutely believe that because he has a funny way of defending his movies. Not saying that like defending your own products is a bad thing, but it's a funny way to go at criticism by doubling down on things that just clearly aren't the case. So, but if it's as you say, it's not good.
Yeah. And apparently even as like, even though I watched the extended cut, Snyder has gone on record just a couple years ago saying that there is a director's cut that hasn't been released yet. And I'm like, please.
Oh, he just wants millions of dollars to rewrite and reshoot it, just like he did for Justice League.
That's the whole thing with Justice League. People are like, his vision finally on screen. I'm like, no, he had years to come up with a new vision and got $75 million more dollars to recraft his vision, both seeing the response to that and then adding in even extra stuff that never would have been there because that 3-hour version of that film never would have been released.
Shout out to the Jared Leto cameo at the end of it, but
right.
There are trailers pre like Zack Snyder leaving and Joss Whedon taking over of Justice League 2017, and they are a lot more like the final product of 2017 than they are of Zack Snyder's recreation of it. So he rewrote his own story of it.
Right.
It's like George R. R. Martin. He hasn't written his final books, but now he has the benefit of hindsight with season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. So he could do whatever he wanted now. And that's exactly what Zack Snyder did.
Yeah, and now he gets things like Rebel Moon on Netflix, which is his second completely original movie, which I didn't do a review for it because, frankly, I just didn't want to talk about it anymore. It was that to me, actually, what I was most surprised by watching Sucker Punch or not, okay, I shouldn't say it like that, but I am surprised after finishing Sucker Punch and feeling how I do about
I'm
it
baffled.
that it's still
I've
not
been
my least
Smeckledorfed.
favorite. It's still not my least favorite of his films because Rebel Moon exists.
Yeah, Rebel Moon does exist. And I
But
wasn't going to
what
drag
Zack
you
Snyder-
into a review of that because I know better.
Yeah. What Zack Snyder does, though, he does pastiche, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. Pastiche is just a form of making something, basically, where you are just pulling from other things, kind of overtly. But Tarantino is an example of a director who definitely is leaning into this pastiche quality.
Yeah,
But he's
his homages
taking it
towards
and
other
really-
filmmakers that he grew up idolizing and that kind of thing.
Right, and he took a lot of like kind of weirdo kind of stuff, grindhouse stuff, B-movie stuff, kind of incorporated into his films in a way that feels unique, feels fresh, and very much his own thing. So it's kind of an evolution of these ideas into like a melting pot to make something new. And Zack Snyder does that with his films. It's just that, I don't know, it doesn't get past the pastiche part of it, where it's just like patchwork things from other things. It's just so just blatant in everything that it's doing, and nothing feels original, despite the fact that this is all technically original.
Yeah, bouncing off of that, the way I would describe his movies as they would be really good as like a 5 to 7 minute music video.
Well, he was
which
a music
is where
video
he got
director.
his start.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Surprise,
that's where
surprise.
he got his start. Yeah, that's whoa. But I feel like this, specifically the action scenes, I would expect it in a music video, or I would expect it as part of a cutscene for a video game, for like a AA production for a video
Right.
game, or like an indie production for a video
This
game.
feels
But
very video gamey, especially for like the 2000s and early 2010s.
Absolutely.
Like the Xbox
Absolutely.
360 era of gaming. That's
well, no, that's just the brown tint that was in every single Xbox 360 game. Shout out to you, Need for Speed Underground. But the problem with it is it's good for 7 minutes and then it loses its charm real quick. For an hour and 50, or for your case, 2 hours and 8 minutes, by the way, that's rough. But to go through that, the whole thing, and it all feels the same, or you're not connecting with something, it's tough to sit through.
Yeah.
It's very tough.
It is. Because that's the kind of thing. So this movie, it opens with Emily Browning's character. Her name's just Baby Doll in the movie. She doesn't even speak for like 20 minutes almost into the film.
No,
so
yeah, she
doesn't get
Emily
addressed.
Browning is a great actress in like Legend, and also even like Lemony Snicket's series of
Violet,
unfortunate events from
yeah.
2004. Yep. Been following her for a while. Love her. But
the cast in this movie is great. This movie has a great cast, and a lot of a lot of the people in it are really giving it their all. And so I don't really slight the actors too much. I think a lot of the actors are honestly doing a great job here. It's just the actual material and execution is just bad. But
yeah, Scott Glenn as an actor I love, but man, is he so awkward in this movie.
Right.
Because he's just exposition old man.
Right. Right, but the movie starts with like slow motion, just music. And,
that's Zack Snyder, baby.
Right, it opens.
It's like the beginning of
Snyder.
Batman versus Superman, dude.
Right,
and it's shot for shot a remake.
But yeah, because her mom dies, I guess, and then her abusive stepdad is there, and she's like trying to protect her sister, but then she ends up causing her sister's death, and then he sends her to this institution, and it all takes a long time to get there because, like I said, it's all very slow motion.
The intro to this movie has what I like to call implied characterization.
Yeah.
It's more so of a thing of, so the doctor comes into Baby Doll's room and starts shaking his head. It's like something bad happened, but it's like, that's confusing. What happened bad? Oh, we've got to pull away the sheet to show it's her mother. And also her father is in his study, like destroying the room and like drinking alcohol. And it's like, it feels like there's a story going on here, but it's not, this is the wrong kind of show don't tell.
Right.
Because it's things that you can infer, or it's things that can be told and shown with like a sense of like grief. But this is not how you show grief. You don't show it to, I think it's a terrible cover of a song and slow motion and just shots of like action happening.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird way to do grief. It
No,
should be.
it's very confusing. I was like, what the heck is going on here? You know, like the movie opened and it's just like, I'm trying to figure out what's happening right now. What's the
and then it pushes right along
here?
and it's never like it just flows forward without taking the time to discuss what happened, why it's bad, and what's going to be affected by it. It just trudges right along. That's all it does.
Right. It doesn't, yeah.
And that's the whole movie.
It's not real characterization. And this movie is just, it's like an audio visual, just like, okay, I kind of feel the same way I feel about Les Miserables.
Oh, yeah.
Where like
I see
the
what you're saying.
2012 one, where it's just like constant, very loud, very sensory, which that movie, I feel like, despite the fact that that is a problem for me with that movie, I feel like it justifies it within what it's trying to do. Here, I'm just like, calm down a little bit. Like, they just keep blasting you with song after song, like opening with, I was like, man, this is like the worst version of Sweet Dreams.
It absolutely is. By the way, did you notice that it's called like Linux Village, the institution?
Yeah, I was like, great, because Annie Lennox, you just...
Yep.
I mean, Snyder has connections with music, so he does get good songs a lot of times in his movie, even though
there was a gigantic budget for this film. Like,
oh yeah,
I get it. We shouldn't be Suicide Squad where we just pump out like random rock songs for openings for things, but I mean, Where Is My Mind by the Pixies, Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics, Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. These are songs that have kind of that. There's a motif Bjork here that can be used.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they did pull Bjork. But when it's terrible covers of songs, it's distracting more so than anything else.
Right.
Because it's like, I know this song. Why are you playing this song but not like the actual song?
Yeah. Yeah. But then, okay, so the actual plot here is really honestly pretty simple. So she gets in there and you got Oscar Isaac, who's kind of like the head guy there, and he sucks. And he's basically...
This is pre-fame Oscar Isaac. He's hamming it up.
Right. This is him taking the role he could get, and he's doing what he can with it, is how I see it. And I like him in this role, honestly. But, I mean, he's a dirtbag, but... he's at least playing it up. He plays
an amazing dirtbag, though.
Right. Right. Because at this point, he was getting, like, Drive. You know, he's playing the asshole boyfriend in that. You know, he gets, like...
this was a couple years before Ex Machina, I think.
Right. Well, Ex Machina came out in, like, what, 2014? 2013? So, yeah.
13 or 14.
Yeah, either way. But he's the head dirtbag. He's got Carla Gugino's there, who also great, works with Snyder
Russian,
a lot.
Or Ukrainian, I think.
Oh yeah, she's Russian for no reason other than she's a dance instructor. The movie takes place probably in like the 60s.
Shout out to John Wick Part 2.
At least they feel like they really justify the Russian.
Also, shout out to Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Right.
Black Widow.
I mean, it's a cliche for a reason, but it's also like, why is it here? But either way, so then Baby Doll ends up at this place, and these girls are all basically being turned into prostitutes slash dancing entertainment for people who come in and pay a lot of money, I guess. Meanwhile,
but they're also in a mental institution,
right? But it's also a mental institution, and Emily.
So there are three levels that I know.
Right.
It's the real world where it's the mental institution.
Right.
There's the level beneath where it's the brothel slash ballet school.
Right.
And then there's the third one where it's just Baby Doll's mind. So it's Inception, but worse. Right.
We spend the most time in that second level, this brothel level. And the whole thing is she's going to get lobotomized. She's scheduled for a lobotomy. And so she has like 5 days or something before the doctor shows up to do that procedure. And she's like, I'm going to escape from here. And she's like, here are these very specific things that I need. And so she convinces some of the other girls there, like, hey, we're going to get out of here. Here's what we need to do. And so then it's just basically, it's just them like pickpocketing various things and then trying to get out.
Like a map for some reason, or like...
Right. A map, like a lighter, you know, it's just, and they keep it on a chalkboard that they just like, nobody will find this, you know? But
nobody will make the connection.
Yeah. Nobody will figure this out. But But either way, that's really the plot of this movie, is that they're just trying to get these items to get out. That's where it's almost very video gamey outside of its presentation too, is just like, we need these simple things and then we can do this.
But the action fight sequences are brought up as like a yes, it's like an action break, but more so like a video game. It's like a break from the plot. Now we have to have some sort of like literal break from the plot.
So there's this theme in the movie of you have to escape into the world of your fantasies. And apparently that's Carla Gugino's character's way of getting them out of like the abuse, you know, is like you have to escape into your fantasy mind world, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what happens. Apparently Baby Doll's like really good at dancing.
But it only happens during a very seductive dance that she is shown to like rev up, but is never shown like the actual dance.
She does this stupid little like shoulder sway.
It's like it's like a shoulder sway.
It's the same one every time.
It's like every middle schooler at a middle school dance. It's that dance.
Right. And then it just like flashes away into this fantasy world where it's just
suddenly she's in like Japan on top of Mount Fuji.
Right. And so
now she's in World War I fighting robots and zombies. Whoop! Now she's on now she's on a plane attacking orcs.
Yeah, and so these action sequences, are absolute nonsense. I'm not even saying they're filmed like poorly. Like there are parts of Zack Snyder's action, like what he does with action, that I think is cool, and I understand that appeal of his filmmaking, but there's so much of it that is not. There's so much of it that's just like so overindulgent. It's so like the special effects, man. Like,
yeah,
it's like, just like I always say, if you cannot pull off the special effect and make it look good, scale back. It's okay to scale back. You don't have to have
Baby Doll. You don't have to have Baby Doll spin around and do a 720 with a sword, breaking dozens of robots when we can't follow really what's going on.
Right. Or like the dragons.
Because she spins around a few... Oh, the dragons.
Yeah.
Or the gigantic fight with the samurai.
Right. There's things that they just look terrible. Like the action choreography is cool when it's actually choreography and not special effects.
Yeah, the zombie gas mask, like the little axe being thrown from, I think it's Rocket's character, I think. Thrown at the guy with the gas mask, and as it hits him in the face, the gas like disperses out and he does like a little flip. That's kind of cool, but that's like it.
But yes, every time they need one of these things, like I need to distract them with my special dance that everybody just loses their mind over, apparently. And then you'll have time to go and steal this item, the map or the lighter or whatever else. It's basically, it's just, and then rinse, repeat. So then... And then
does it like 4 or 5 times.
Right. And that's the movie. And then every single one of these sequences is just completely detached from, you know, what you're mostly following along with, because it's just their fantasy version of it. And I get that it's paralleling what happens there, you know?
It is absolutely not. I would disagree with that entirely. That's actually my main complaint of the action sequences is none of them really connect.
No.
In a way.
They don't
other than just trying to find something.
Like
because it's like they could absolutely be like, I mean, war, if you're going into the trenches of World War I, it could be in the case of like somebody who's, the reason why they see the people they're fighting as zombies is because they've dehumanized them, and you can see that as like it's Oscar Isaac's character is the one killing all the zombies, and Baby Doll is like trying to help him like see the error of just killing people randomly because he's dehumanizing them. That could be a difference. That could be something that is like characterization towards Baby Doll is trying to, in her mind, see Oscar Isaac's character as a better person, even if it's not the case. Or something can come of that. Or the action can necessarily, you know, affect the plot in some way. But as soon as the dance stops and the action sequence stops, nothing changes.
Right. They just have a map, which Hannah
a map.
Hannah was like, I'm going to go on a limb. And this is giving Snyder a lot of credit. But it's like sometimes what looks like compliance can actually be a way of survival. So even though it looks like in the the regular world or the brothel world or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. In that world, it looks like they're just kind of going along with what they're supposed to be doing, but inside their minds, it's like this war, this whole battle, and I think that is what he's kind of going for. It's just, once again, a matter of execution in every kind of way, to the point where you're making this movie about how these girls are escaping their abuse. They're like, these are all sexually abused, just physically abused girls trying to escape this place that continues to do that even more so to them. And even in their fantasies, that's where you have the Scott Glenn character. And for some reason, they have to be told what to do by this guy, It's like, I feel like you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Of like, let's go into the fantasy world in our own minds, these young women trying to escape, and let's be told what we need to do by this old man. I was like, did you miss what you were trying to do here? I don't know.
No, I get it. Going back to Hannah's point, because it's not, when we activate our fight or flight responses, this is in the real world, the actual real world, like in actual biology. When we activate fight or flight, it's not exactly just fight or flight. Was it fight or flight, freeze, fawn? I think is the form. Yeah. And fawn is a bit like Stockholm syndrome, where you're actually connecting to the person who's abusing you, but only because it's a way of trying to
survival
dispel. Yeah. It's trying to bond to end the suffering, but you're trying to end the suffering with the person who's going to continue to abuse you because they're manipulative and controlling, and that's the nature of an abuser. But I can see that the action sequences were trying to be that kind of like fawn, where they're trying to escape any way they can, and so just making it so that it's not about the sexual abuse and it's not about anything, but it's about like violence, or it's a way of like dealing with that kind of stress. Right. Yeah, but it absolutely falls flat.
Right.
For like storytelling, that doesn't work like that. It doesn't just necessarily work like that. It's more confusing to make it about that kind of thing without explaining why these action sequences, why they are what they are, and without also, them just being really cool and like, just
if you wanted some cool fantasy action sequences to kind of like show what you're trying to show, that's fine. That's a cool idea, honestly. But these scenes are endless. And like I said, they are nonsense. There's points in it where I'm like, this scene, like, I particularly, okay, so the first one is the first one with like the Nazi zombies, which one I'm like, you have a limitless options.
Wait, no, the first one is the
samurai
Japan one, yeah.
But that's just where she gets the instructions, so it's a little different.
Yeah, that's where she gets her weapons.
Right.
the pistol and the sword, and it's like, okay, guy, just get in these weapons.
Right.
But
and
the
Scott Glenn tells her what things she needs to get to escape. And then, so the first like real big sequence of these action sequences when they're sealing the map is this Nazi zombie sequence. And I'm like, you have unlimited options for what you can represent in this fantasy reality, and you chose Nazi zombies. Yes. As if that wasn't something that, especially in like 2011, was like done to death. So, like, I get that that's kind of its own trope. We talked about that a bit with our Overlord episode, how that is kind of its own thing. But it's like,
Snyder just wanted to be like, hey, Dawn of the Dead, remember?
Right, that's that pastiche thing, though. It's like, you didn't take it to a different place, though. You just did it.
No, it's the exact same. Right, it's basically shot for shot out of a Black Ops Zombies map. Right.
And there's a little bit more of a steampunk flavor to it in its design, but it's like, it's stupid. There's a mech. I don't know. It just keeps going. Like, it just keeps... like
there are blimps.
Yeah, there are zeppelins and stuff. But like that scene, I'm like, okay, I'm figuring out what the movie's doing at that point still. But by the time you get to that second long sequence with like the dragons and the machine guns, Which I'm like, once again, you just jumped from World War One to World War Two in terms of like the technology that they're using. Like, very creative of you, but let's just throw it into Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, let's just throw it into Lord of the Rings / Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Which those orcs looked exactly like Lord of the Rings
They
orcs.
did. Yes,
I assume
they did.
Peter Jackson didn't want to copyright claim a movie which is not going to be remembered much.
Right. And technically, same umbrella studio ultimately, since Warner Brothers owns New Line. But whatever, it doesn't matter. But that
this movie somehow makes Lord of the Rings worse. I hate it even more now.
But that sequence, I was like, is this sequence ever gonna end? I don't know what the heck's even happening at this point. It's just cool action stuff happening for the sake of nothing. Because
don't stop. The third one is they're on a train trying to stop a bomb from blowing up a city that doesn't exist.
Right.
With
like
robots.
There's no stakes. There's no stakes. Like, I know exactly I know that it's representing, because when there is failure that happens and you see a character get basically killed in the fantasy, they're also killed in reality. So I get that there are parallels, but man,
yeah, it's Spy Kids 3, game over.
Like, I thought when they were
killed
cutting
in the
open,
game, you killed in real life.
During that dragon sequence, I thought when they were killing the baby dragon, they like slit open its throat and then like grabbed the thing from inside of it. I was like, oh, cool. That's them getting the lighter from the guy. And I like that they're representing him as a dragon, but really just a baby dragon. I think that's kind of neat. But then no, the sequence has like 8 more minutes in it, and that wasn't it at all. That wasn't the parallel there. I'm just like confused. I'm just like, you cannot show me all of this stuff. I'm just so confused right now because it's too much. It's too much in the sensoriness of it all. There's the whole.
How funny is it that you on the spot were a better writer than Zack Snyder at that moment?
I know. And there's his music uses are infuriating.
They're terrible.
Because there's the one song, I don't even know what the song is, but it's just like describing things from Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, yeah, I freaking get it, man. I get that you're doing an Alice in Wonderland thing. Way to pick a song that seems to just be simply describing things that exist in Alice in Wonderland. Like, that's the only lyrics that I was hearing from that song. I was like, shut up. And then the
only thing I'll say for the music is he does bring the music back for parallels to the end sequence, but that's about it.
Sure.
And it's just 2 times. He brings up Where Is My Mind, and he brings up Sweet Dreams for like Sweet Dreams when Sweet Pea is talking to Baby Doll when Baby Doll is and her sister are in the house or in the institution, and then at the end when Baby Doll lets Sweet Pea go.
Yeah.
But that's about it. That's basic stuff for leitmotifs.
Yeah.
That's basic.
Right. It's
so
like
I can't really give him credit more than that.
It's just those action scenes are so overlong in what they're trying to show. And they're just like the storytelling within the action sequences is non-existent. It's literally just showing the cool action. And you understand that in the real world they're completing their objective the further along they get towards whatever their objective seems to be in that action sequence. But there's no real connection. And I'm just like, I just want to get to the next part of this.
Yeah.
But to be fair, once again, I was more confused than I was bored watching those sequences. I was just like, what the heck is going on? Versus
that's
like Rebel
most of
Moon.
Zack Snyder's movies,
right,
to be fair.
But versus like Rebel Moon, where I was just like ripping at my skin wanting it to end. Like, please, why am I watching this? Why am I doing this to myself?
This movie causes me to hurt myself.
So at least I will take the confusion of this film over the excruciating boredom of Rebel Moon any day. But
sure,
it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, that's a low bar.
It's a very, very low bar. It's like I'd rather be peed on than pooped on, you know? Ugh.
Can we have neither, though?
That's what I prefer, to have neither of those things happen. So, but yeah, Hannah wanted to note too that she's like, she says, 1, she hates this movie, and 2, it's a chaotic sensory overload that looks like shit and doesn't empower anyone. Has he even met a woman not on his payroll? He wanted to be a movie director so bad. It's what Hannah said. So yeah,
Has
Hannah
she
was.
seen a Zack Snyder movie? I gotta know.
I don't know. I don't know if she has. Um, yeah, because the only one I think she maybe would have come across as like a Man of Steel or something,
Man
but
of Steel
I don't
or
even think
Batman
she's
versus
seen that.
Superman.
Yeah, I don't even think she's seen those. But
Well, Man of Steel was arguably his biggest hit, so
Man of
it's possible.
Steel, I think, is Zack Snyder's best film. I've been on record saying I don't like 300. I have not seen Watchmen. That's the only other film of his that I've not seen, other than this, until now.
What about Dawn of the Dead?
Oh, I haven't seen Dawn of the Dead either. Okay. So
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
seen Dawn of the Dead or Watchmen, but I don't like 300.
Ugh.
The Guardians of the Gahul movie is honestly,
It is what it is.
It
I
is
wouldn't
what
call
it
it a
is.
Snyder movie, really.
It's still one of his best, but it's not great. It's just it's a little
Yeah.
confusing because once again his presentation just kind of makes it hard to tell what's going on sometimes. But I do think that I like his sensibilities brought to animation specifically. Like if you're gonna go something like Sucker Punch, where it's like pretty much completely CGI at points, may as well just make it an animated movie and go all out.
You know what this could have been?
What's
Do
that?
you remember in Kill Bill, the Lucy Liu's character is introduced via like an anime sequence?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this could be an hour and 50-minute version of that, and I'd be fine with it.
Sure.
Make it that. I mean, that comes with sexual abuse and problems with family, problems with people like harming your family and also like children. That's got the same kind of topics. It wouldn't be the same. Zack Snyder would still probably fuck it up with some like aesthetic choice. But man, I mean, speaking of which, Quentin Tarantino considered this one of the worst movies of 2011. So
yeah. I mean, Tarantino, you can always count on him to make his opinion known, love him or hate him.
Well, no, we brought him up a few times this episode now, so might as well figure out what he thinks about this.
Thing, yeah. For sure. Yeah. I think a lot of people thought it was one of the worst movies of 2011, and I'm right there with them. But this movie has fans. Like, this movie really does have staunch defenders, and they've grown over time. You know, this movie's kind of like a lot of cult films, which I hate to say it, but this movie has like that kind of strong cult following. It's not like a lot of
movies. It's not like a lot of movies in the last like 12 years. I suspect that's why. Because when I looked at Yes Man, which was not my choice technically to look at Yes Man, but when I looked at Yes Man, it was a breath of fresh air given the comedies that I've seen in the last decade. Right. So I think that might be it. I think in the next like 20 years, this movie, as much as you and I both despise it, I think it will be a breath of fresh air based on the trend of how action movies seem to be going, in my eye.
I don't know. I don't know if I could ever consider this to be a breath of fresh air. It feels suffocating watching it.
Yeah.
So, but that's my own opinion, obviously. Like I said, there are genuine fans of this movie. I just don't understand the whole, like, once again, I understand what Snyder says about this movie and says what this movie's about, but it just doesn't come across on screen in any way that's meaningful. This doesn't feel...
I thought he just wanted to make a cool action movie.
No, he was trying to make...
understand
He said that he was making a movie that a lot of the people who would go to see it based on what it looks like, it's really kind of like spitting on them, kind of as the sense of like kind of the idea that he was saying, you know.
Yo, what? I just looked it up. All right, this is the quote. In retrospect, Snyder said, "I'm always shocked that it was so badly misunderstood. I always said it was a commentary on sexism and geek culture."
No, yeah, he said, yeah.
What?
No, like, and that's what is. I believe that he believes that this is what this movie is about. But
how is that going to come across, Zach?
Well, it's like, because he said that too. Like, it's the empowering thing of like these women coming through these like this abuse. You know, is that the whole thing there? Which they don't actually in this movie. Only one character actually makes it out, and it does that whole thing that I hate.
Yeah, Abby Cornish's character.
It's like, this wasn't about me the whole time. It was your story all along.
Oh my God, it was literally the whole thing. The whole thing is a not real thing that occurs during a lobotomy of the main character. It was exactly about Baby Doll the whole time.
Right. There is an interesting scene that I didn't look up like all the differences, but I heard that one of the differences in the extended edition is this John Hamm scene towards the end of the movie. And that was kind of an interesting point in the movie. Because he comes in with a certain way, and I still don't know how fully I feel about it, but he's more so than any other man in the movie that's been dealing with her, is more tender with her, despite still doing something harmful to her. And it's a weird kind of thing. And that scene was apparently cut because of censors, you know, because Zack Snyder wanted this to be PG-13. So he made this as a PG-13.
Which is crazy.
Right. I'm like,
that is crazy.
I'm like, whatever. I get it with your budget. Maybe that gives you more leeway to have a bigger budget, but whatever. You're known for pretty R-rated films. So, but either way, the extended cut is R-rated, not for any reason
Guardians
other
of
than
Gahul.
Yeah.
Noted R-rated movie.
But the extended cut's only R-rated because it did get approved. Like, it's not unrated. It got an MPAA rating for that version of the film. That they cut down that scene so much, apparently, that in the final version of it, it was going to look like he just like assaults her. So they just cut it out entirely. So I guess, does John Hamm just show up at the very end of the movie?
Yeah, he shows up as like a high roller kind of guy, and then he's the doctor who performs the lobotomy.
Right.
I guess that's pretty much it.
That is what it is in the extended, but that scene where with him as the high roller is like a really long scene. It's like a 5-minute scene.
I don't remember it being very long in the regular cut.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think
supposedly there's also a director's cut,
right,
with an alternate ending.
Yes, so that's what I was. Yeah, that's Zack Snyder brought that up a few years ago. I'm like, just chill out with the director's cut stuff. Like on Rebel Moon, he said there's a director's cut of that. I'm like, you got carte blanche from Netflix. Like,
stop it.
Literally, that's just trying to like recapture some weird Snyder cut hype.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. 99% of the time, Zack Snyder is going to say this only because he knows that there's a fandom that will want to see it.
Right.
But trust me, Warner Bros. And Netflix, if they chose to cut out parts of his movie, they are in the right on that. They are in the right on those situations.
He's just not a good storyteller. That's just my main issue here. And his character writing is so poor that whatever his characters were supposed to be, it just doesn't come across. And this is the worst example of that among his whole filmography, I think. So
my main issue is because of how impactful he's been. Because I'll say it again, it is a wild experiment that came about when Justice League, the film that came out in 2017, got a reproduction featuring another director, or the original director, coming in to finish what he thought would be taken as the best light. And he added an hour and a half worth of stuff to it. Imagine real quick, Lord and Miller were the original directors of Solo before Ron Howard came in. Right. Imagine if 2 years after Solo came out, Disney said, all right, we're going to have a 4-hour version of Solo where Lord and Miller are going to come back. We're going to pump another like $70 million into it, and they're going to come out with their product.
Streaming,
and that's going to be
Plus.
The canon. And that's going to be canon. The DCEU took Zack Snyder's version of Justice League as canon.
Well,
so that opens the door to
we will never know how canon they took that, because frankly everything else that came after was pretty inconsequential.
I'm pretty sure most of the directors, probably not Patty Jenkins, but you'll know this. Who is the director of Aquaman?
James Wan.
James Wan said that Aquaman was a direct sequel to Zack Snyder's version of Justice League.
Sure. Like, you can say that, but ultimately you can watch the 2017 Justice League and watch the Snyder Cut and go straight into Aquaman, because Aquaman's a silly, goofy cartoon of a movie that I actually kind of enjoy, but it in no way... The reason I
find it funny is Amber Heard's character has a British accent in Zack Snyder's version, yes. But doesn't in Justice League and doesn't in Aquaman.
Well, also, Atlantis looks different.
Atlantis looks a lot different.
So it's like, sure, you can say that all you want, but it's, I don't know.
But my point is there's a legitimacy that was given to Zack Snyder's version of Justice League.
And
that's something that has never happened before.
Yeah, which I will say, I mean, we brought this up before. I know you've trashed specifically on Zack Snyder's Justice League. Um, I do like his version better than the 2017 film. I think it feels more complete. That 2017 one feels chopped up. It feels like it was definitely, while it wasn't going to be a 4-hour movie, it also wasn't going to be under 2 hours. So it was probably going to be a 2:45 kind of movie in its original version, I would imagine.
My main problem with it is Zack Snyder's version destroys the entirety of the franchise. It completely turns everything on its head, and necessarily everything would have to be rebooted from that.
Sure.
So that's my issue. I don't care that I think Justice League is a terrible movie. I think Zack Snyder's Justice League is a terrible movie. I don't quibble about which one people find better or what I think is better, because I do think it's worse for the franchise as a whole. And so therefore it's the worst movie.
No, I'm just saying, of Zack Snyder's films, I actually kind of liked his version of Justice League despite everything, but I think it's because he had more perspective and more time on what went wrong with that original version of it, that he was able to correct some things in a way that did improve the product for me overall, even though it was still too little too late for that universe as a whole, that I think Zack Snyder sent into a bad direction personally. Because while I like Man of Steel, or at least, I like about 70% of Man of Steel, I really didn't like BVS much at all. And then from that point on, the universe was kind of just all over the place. So
it just sets a wild precedent for this, because this could happen very well down the line for Marvel or Star Wars, and it's just that's going to break franchises.
Well, it was a huge mistake.
We've never seen.
Fortunately, it was a huge mistake. Well, it was a huge mistake financially, because Warner Brothers, when AT&T still owned Warner Brothers, they're the ones who approved that. They're the ones that gave him $75 million for a straight to streaming thing that was never going to draw in a large audience, because as much as you feel the impact of it, because it's allowed online, like those people who were wanting that, it's not going to be enough to get, the people who probably a lot of them already subscribed to your service, because that's where all your DC content is anyway, to watch
and they're
this
fans
one
of Zack
movie.
Snyder's DCEU anyway.
It's already been a stupid thing to spend a ton of money on movies that go straight to streaming, because it's proven time and time again that when a movie goes to theaters, it does better on streaming. The 10 movies that were like the top 10 most watched movies of last year were all theatrically released in some capacity. So, like, just across all streaming. So it's like, this is a proven thing, and that they took a bath on that. And after that caused a lot of layoffs, and other stuff happened, because that was a disaster of a release for them to have done that for that movie. It was a really stupid idea. And so nobody else is going to do it, fortunately, because they saw what kind of, repercussions there were, for Warner Brothers for doing that, as well as some other. I
certainly hope they don't, but I'm not going to hold my breath and say that it's never going to happen again, because I don't know. Companies, especially these kind of companies, make stupid decisions all the time based on what they think is going to make money rather than what can make money.
I don't know. If you're going to make an extended edition or director's cut, just release it on media that people can buy independently. Don't just dump it on a streaming service, and usually have it as a bonus feature in like the.
Well, no, Zack Snyder's Justice League did come out as a DVD.
It did because they needed to capitalize on it.
Didn't sell well.
No, I'm sure it didn't, but but that's a whole other aside, basically. Otherwise, like I said,
I'd rather talk about this than Sucker Punch, obviously. So I like some of the performances in here. The other girls in here are Abby Cornish as Sweet Pea. You have Vanessa Hudgens kind of coming off of High School Musical in this as Blondie. When was senior year, like 2008 or something like that?
Right, just a few years later. So it was definitely in that period where she was definitely trying to shed that Disney image. Jamie Chung is in here as Amber, and Jenna Malone is here as Rocket. A lot of these are people who I've Raccoon. A lot of these are people that I've liked in other things, and frankly, they're fine here. Like, I'm not counting the the performances are not bad in this movie. I don't think. I think it's just everything around it is so awful. So it's just hard for me to like. I just want to say none of the actors should feel bad about having done this movie. You know,
I imagine none of them remember this or like.
Well, I know Jenna Malone almost quit acting because of the negative reception to this movie.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and like it takes a hit when you're in a movie like this. You take up a big period of your time, and it's a huge bomb critically and commercially. That's got to take some amount of a hit on you. But I just got like none of the actors in this movie do a bad job. And so they're just working with what they can. And apparently, like I've said, Zack Snyder is apparently a lovely person to work with. People really like working with him. So, which is probably why he keeps getting work, even because his products don't really turn a profit a lot of the times, you know, or at least they
not
underperform.
Recently, no.
Not recently, not since really this. Has he made a movie that was like definitively a hit? So, as Man of Steel underperformed, it made money, but it underperformed for what it needed to do. BVS,
I don't think it underperformed. BVS definitely did.
It underperformed for what they needed it to do. I mean, yeah, like it's not a matter of him not making movies that were profitable. It's just every single time that a movie that should have been bigger than it was came out, it just wasn't, and it's mostly due to the mixed reception.
Well, bigger than it was in the purview of what people expect, or bigger than it was under what Warner Brothers expects?
I think under what Warner Brothers expects. I think people are divided on all of his movies to some extent, one way or another. But Warner Brothers, with the amount of money that they're putting into these things, is expecting a higher return on these films than they were getting. And so that's why... You know, that's why they were kind of...
Yeah, because they expected to come in and immediately be Marvel.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, too. Like, Batman v Superman should be a movie that outperforms a Captain America versus Iron Man movie.
Absolutely not. Like, on paper, yes. But in the reality of 8 years of Marvel versus one movie in the DCEU, that was really riding the coattails of the Dark Knight trilogy. They really wanted that to be, like... of the same cloth,
but it's just
cut from the same cloth.
Right, but that's what I'm saying though. It's
just not
all of it from the studio side of things down to who they got to make it. I think was the problem with what happened there. They didn't put forward somebody who was creatively capable of getting it to be a universally liked film, you know, or at least a majority liked film. Zack Snyder
I don't think that was a very realistic thing for it to make that much money. Right. I don't think it was ever realistic for Man of Steel or Batman v Superman to make Captain America Civil War or Age of Ultron money. I
just remember those debates in that year when it came out. Everybody, like so many people thought that BVS was going to do better than Captain America because there was so much hype around it. There just was.
Okay, but that's people's expectations. I don't think there's a single Warner Brothers executive who thought that. No way. No shot.
Yeah, who's to say? But yeah, anyway, do you want to move into scoring on this one?
Yeah, let's talk about Sucker Punch again.
Let's go back to Sucker Punch.
Talk about more.
Clearly we're avoiding Sucker Punch.
We are.
I think I needed a break from talking about it. All right, scoring as usual on this show is we have 10 categories where we rank them from 0 to 2, 0 being not good, 1 being good, 2 being great. We keep it broad just for the sake of the show. That's the show's rating. Doesn't necessarily reflect our own. That's just how we do it here. First category, as usual, is writing. 0.
Oh, it's just easy 0.
0.
Very, very easy.
Second category is world building.
Also a 0.
World building. I'm
not giving it a 1, mate.
No. If I could give it a negative 1, I would, because the world is so specific. To mess it up so hard when you are doing something so specific with it, that just gets me. Like, that makes me want to give it a negative. Yeah. Because it's not just like a world that's like not that interesting or anything. No, it's a world that in better hands, a better storyteller could have made this specific concept work really well. But in Zack Snyder's hands, and I know it's his idea, it's so underbaked. It's just nothing. It just is nothing. So
There's no Stephen S. Goyer or Christopher Nolan to fall back on this time, Zach.
yeah.
Oh, Christopher Nolan wrote the first. He wrote Man of Steel.
He did.
He did.
Did he?
Or at
write
least
it?
he was like the main producer on it. At least
I don't think he wrote it.
I think he had a hand in it.
I know he had a hand in it, but
Yeah,
okay, he wrote the story.
it was Goyer's. Yeah,
Yes,
but
Goyer wrote the screenplay. Nolan wrote the story, which makes sense. The story is structured very much like a Nolan film, particularly that first half. But
yeah,
talk about building off the hype of Nolan's Batman trilogy, though. That's what Man of Steel was doing, which is why when it didn't make, I think it made like
so much money at it,
something
even
million.
more than the Dark Knight trilogy, and it still couldn't do a lot with it. Because all things considered, what did it make? Like almost 700 million or something around that? Like, that's not bad. And that's about what Batman Begins made, right?
Yeah.
So, or Batman Begins only made like 550 million or something like that. But to have a budget so high as Man of Steel, you can't really do that.
This is why I'm looking forward to James Gunn's new take on Superman, because James Gunn's films aren't going to be for everybody. He has a certain style that he does things with, just like any director, but he has an understanding of crafting meaningful narrative and making characters that you can love.
The important thing here is experience.
Right.
Zack Snyder's experience in this genre of comic book movies specifically was Watchmen and 300. Not exactly like Guardians of the Galaxy or Suicide Squad 2018 or whatever year that came out.
2021.
Oh wow, that was late.
Which is the one movie of the DCEU that I like genuinely love is James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
But but either way,
low bar.
It's a low bar, but I really love that movie, which is why I'm happy that it pretty much stands on its own, So, like, it barely even ties into the other Suicide Squad movies. So,
are we still in world building?
We're still in world building.
Yeah.
Characters is our next category. That's another zero.
It's another zero, unfortunately.
Directing is our next category.
Is absolutely a zero.
Absolutely,
I have no idea what you're going for here.
Zack Snyder has been better before. I don't think I would personally, for most of his films, there might be one or two films that I'd give him a 1 for directing. Maybe.
No, there's a few. I think, I don't know if I would give Man of Steel a 1. I would definitely give Dawn of the Dead, or even I would give Watchmen. I don't like that movie a lot, but I still think the directing is strong enough to give it a 1.
Yeah.
So I know you haven't seen it, but
I think I'd give Man of Steel
picks.
a 1. Yeah, I think I'd give Man of Steel a 1, and I would probably give his Justice League a 1, even though I know that you probably disagree with that, but that's kind of it for the most part.
I think given the context of $70 million extra dollars on top of like a completed project that you already had, it's rough. He was given the most amount of advantages.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is a definitive 0, though. This
Absolutely.
is really bad.
This is rough. This is predictable story. Yeah, it's predictable for him.
Right, and it leans still so hard into those graphic novel kind of shots that I just don't like this kind of way of things looking, both in his like other films like 300, but even I don't like Sin City. I don't like the way that Sin City kind of presents itself, and this has that kind of flavor to it, and that's just not for me. I don't dig it. So
Carla Gugino should probably stay away from comic book movies. Watchmen, Sin City, this.
I mean, she ends up in a lot of these types of projects, so even though this isn't technically a comic book movie, it just looks like one and acts like one too.
Yeah, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but doesn't have the backing of a DC, Dark Horse, or Marvel like a duck, then it might still be a duck. I don't know.
All right, acting is the next category. I think I'm willing to give acting a 1. It's one of the few things I'll give this movie. I think the performers are doing a good job in what they're given. I just think that what they're given is not that much. But Particularly, I think that Oscar Isaac and Carla Gugino are doing a good job here, as well as I think
Yeah, I
Emily
think Gina
Browning
Malone
is
and
good, despite the flatness of what her character is. Jenna
yeah.
Malone I like a lot, and Abby Cornish. I think that Vanessa Hudgens and Jamie Chung are, a little bit.
Vanessa Hudgens to me in this movie is exactly what Rihanna is in the Battleship movie. It's it's kind of that flat acting from somebody who you would expect can act, but it comes
Yeah,
across weird.
she's been better
And
in
she
other
even has the
things.
oh my god, she even has the so in Battleship Rihanna is like firing on an alien or something and she goes like Mahala motherfucker. But it's censored, of course, because we got to keep it PG-13, guys.
Right,
Vanessa Hudgens does the exact same thing
right. She does.
in
She
this movie
does.
on a minigun.
So I'm at a soft one for the acting here. How do you feel about it?
I think I'm still towards 0, oddly enough, because I think these guys know better. Like these. Yes, these actors are doing all they can, but it still comes across as flat most of the time. And I agree, it's not the actor's fault, but some of it is just kind of still that
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah. I also think it's worse in those action sequences, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that most of those sequences aren't real sets, and they're just kind of jumping around and stuff in like empty set, basically, I imagine.
Like Scott Glenn, I like as an actor, but I hate him in this movie because of the way that he comes across.
Yeah.
Like Oscar Isaac is
and
the
that
best
role
one
was
here.
written for him.
That role. It was written wrong then. Okay.
All right, I'll go with you to a 0. I'm fine with that. Even though
I think
I don't think
this
it's any of their
easily could have been a
faults.
2 for acting, but it's held back so much, and I'm not going to grade it on a curve because these guys know better.
They're all great actors, and like I said, most of them are doing a fine job here. It's just the material is limiting to what they're able to do.
It's so rough.
Right. So, yeah, acting 0 then. All right, visuals. That's like another one of those things that if I could go negative with it, I would.
Yeah.
Like it's. I understand that some people really love Zack Snyder's aesthetic. I don't. I just don't.
I'll say this. I watched it in like 2012 or 2013. It looked a lot better then than it does now. But
Oh,
yeah,
I imagine, yeah.
but
even then, like,
video games
I don't know.
or anything.
I don't know. There was still some, like, I know it's not to the budget of something like a Pirates of the Caribbean, but when you get used to these large scale studio films looking a certain level of polish, it's like, once again,
This has no polish.
If you can't accomplish that, it's fine to scale back. In fact, limitations that can sometimes push you to do things in more interesting ways. But this just kind of does whatever it wants with it, and it just looks worse because of it. So,
yeah. I'm glad that you brought up Pirates of the Caribbean because, the budget of that film was so smartly used. The CGI needed for like Barbossa's crew was so
particularly
smartly used.
the first one.
All of it's like dark. Yeah, exactly. All of it's particularly shot dark, so it's much easier to like grasp, or it's used sparingly, or when it's used, it's mostly used on the comedy duo of the pirates. I can't remember their names.
Right.
Hello Puppet, those guys, and Barbossa, and everyone else is just kind of in the background. But
and then the sequels, those
practical.
budgets ballooned to crazy amounts. But those movies look incredible. So it's
Davy
like
Jones still looks
incredible.
So good.
So
he still looks.
I'm
so
not
good.
trying to. I'm not saying it should look as good with its special effects as that movie. I'm just saying that if you
I'm
don't
arguing
have
it probably should get close with Zack Snyder's experience.
Well, with the resources that they have, they're not going to be able to get there at that period of time. But if that's the case, then maybe don't try to make a movie that uses as many big effect sequences as those movies.
Yeah.
So, yeah, either way, visual 0. Editing. If you really like music videos and you just were like, I just wanted to watch a series of interconnected but disparate music videos, then maybe the editing works for you. But for me, this is a big fat 0.
Yeah.
Sound.
Now, as much as I will say this, as much as we like talked bad about the fact that like the covers are weirdly used and like how much worse they are than the songs that they use, it's because they use "When the Levee Breaks" by Led Zeppelin, "Tomorrow Never Knows" by the Beatles, "Sweet Dreams" by the Eurythmics, and "Where Is My Mind" by the Pixies. All of those songs are masterpieces in their own
Great
right.
songs. The music choices are great. The actual
yes, the music
implementation
choices.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But so, I will say also, though, the music choices, while they're great songs, I hate the way that Zack Snyder uses music a lot of times because he doesn't really take the meaning of it. He just takes the words of it and uses it in a very literal way. And I think the prime example of this is his Army of the Dead movie, where he used the song "Zombie" at the end of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, this movie's full of stuff like that, where it's like you don't get the meaning of the song. You're just using it because it sounds right, based on the lyrics of it.
Yeah, let's take the Notebook and put "Pride in the Name of Love" by U2 in it without knowing.
Right. It's like, okay, I get that. Oh, "Sweet Dreams," yeah, whatever. But I'm like, it doesn't. It fits, but it's so on the nose in terms of just the lyric aspect of it. But it just doesn't. Once again, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. It just doesn't do anything. Like the way he uses it, it's just, yeah, it's very frustrating. But yeah, sound to me, it's overwhelming. This movie, its audio landscape is
definitely overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, and it doesn't stop. So I hated the way this movie sounded just because of how much it sounded, I guess. So I'm at a 0 with sound personally. Where are you?
The only thing I was going to bring up is the performances are mostly Emily Browning, Oscar Isaac, and Carla Gugino. So props to you. You sounded great, but sorry, you didn't sound like John Lennon, Paul McCartney, or Robert Plant, or Annie Lennox. So sorry. You can't fill those shoes. I'm
it's also sorry. Like this was right in the era too of like movie trailers getting slowed down, like female versions of like popular like rock songs and stuff like that. Like you'd see those in like every trailer. They'd have some version of just exactly what I'm talking about. And here it's just like the whole movie is full of that. And I'm like, please stop.
Yeah.
I mean, this trailer for this movie won an award because the movie looks like a trailer, so it's probably not that hard to make a good trailer for it.
Trailers are basically music videos.
Right.
And what is Zack Snyder good at? But 5 minutes of footage.
Right.
So I believe it. But his music video is probably good. His movies, well, can we say the same?
All right. Next category is genre, which...
Is this the time where we put the genre of bad movie and it's 2?
Yeah, it's an action movie, but okay, I'm fully willing to admit that
some of the action's pretty good.
Yeah, some of the action's pretty good. Also, like this is one of those movies that it has extended action sequences in it, but maybe I'm just hesitating to call it an action movie just because they're so separate from what's actually happening in the film that it doesn't feel like an action movie. I don't know. To define it, I'm not trying to like limit movies by putting in a definition because some movies do cross genres and stuff here. In this case, I think that its biggest feature are those action set pieces. And while some of the action is cool...
No, that was its selling point.
Because that was its selling point.
The story was not well thought out at all, was it?
Right.
So.
And while some of the action is cool within those things, a lot of it just doesn't work for me. And like I've said so much, those action sequences are also meaningless that I can't give this a 1 even. I feel like this is a pretty easy 0 for me.
I'm trying to think of just another movie like this, other than just Snyder has his genre of movies, and that's about it.
Right.
Because this is, again, one of the epitomes of a Snyder movie.
Right.
And it's definitely not his best. So...
Yeah, I would say in terms of like other films that... I guess as far as the pacing of it, like with the action sequences and some of the concept stuff, The Matrix would be the closest thing to this.
Kind of.
The Matrix
I see that.
infinitely better at doing kind of what this movie's doing to
Yeah.
some extent. This one's just throwing in that kind of
Or this feels like
hospital
a mid
drama thing,
2000s
or
Resident Evil movie.
yeah, very video gamey for sure.
Yeah.
Which The Matrix is a little bit too, but
Video gamey, absolutely.
yeah, but it's just, I think The Matrix is a prime example of this kind of action film in terms of its action qualities being done so much better.
You know what the difference is? The action affects the characters in the plot.
Right. Right. That really is the thing.
That is well, it also has something to say about real life in 1999. So
Yeah.
there's that too.
Yeah.
There's something for audiences to get out of it.
You actually have a story that's been crafted and is good. Even the Matrix sequels, which are not nearly as good as that first film. Like, I like the second one fine, and the third one is very mediocre. It's not great.
Yeah.
But I like the second one more than I think a lot of people. And I still think it hits like on the action sequences and like the motivations, the through lines of it all. It's compelling narrative, you know.
I like
But
the
this just
third
doesn't
one
have.
in the same way that I like Return of the Jedi. It's finishing the story of a good
Right.
trilogy. If it's the weakest one, I don't care.
The problem with
It's-
the third one is that it's just like not spending any time in the Matrix.
Yeah.
It barely does, and I'm like, well, that's the whole title of this thing, and that's where everything is most interesting.
Come on. You're tapping the top of the TV. Come on, do Matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. But like, yeah, I don't think the third Matrix is terrible. I just think it's underwhelming.
No, I think the reason I like it is because it completes the story in a somewhat satisfying way. It's
Right,
probably not.
right.
It's definitely not perfect. It's probably not good, but
I feel
it's
the
just
same way
completing the
about
thing.
like X-Men 3. I've been rewatching those lately. I haven't gotten to 3 yet in my rewatch, but X-Men 3 to me, I don't think on its own is an absolutely atrocious movie. But I think that for the franchise that it was a part of and that I thought was, you know, getting better as
Especially
it was
because
going along.
X2 was so good.
Right. X2's great.
Yeah.
And then X3 comes out and it's just like completely underwhelming, you know, for like as a resolution. I feel a little bit like that about the third Matrix. Like I'm a bit
Wait.
underwhelmed here, but
Wait, hold up. Didn't they make fun of that in X-Men Apocalypse, where they're coming out of Return of the Jedi and
yes.
Jean Grey says, well, at least we know the third one is always the worst.
Right, which that was the end of a trilogy too.
That was the end of a trilogy, and X3 was always, Last Stand was always like seen as like
Right.
the wrong way to end a trilogy.
Right.
Well, Apocalypse came before Dark Phoenix, which was a movie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But either way, let's get back to Sucker Punch again because we keep
we're on Impact, right?
Yeah, genres is 0, so Impact is our last category. It might be the only point we give this movie.
Possibly. I was actually like, acting I would have thought would be 1, but then I realized like the opposite curve needs to happen where it's like everyone in this movie knows better. So but
kind of what we said with Crash.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like in a vacuum, the Crash acting is on the okay to good side,
Right.
but like, you know better.
Right.
Don Cheadle.
Okay, the impact here, and the only reason that I was ever going to watch this movie is because it did spark so much discourse that, frankly, has continued to this day.
Kind of.
Just with Snyder in general, there's just always a lot of discussion around him, and I think that this gets to be kind of the case in point of maybe Snyder isn't that good. But I think that this movie, despite everything, does have some impact pop culturally that has carried through a bit, even if it's because it's bad.
Yeah, this also did, and I did look it up, this did cause Gina Malone to almost quit acting. That is an impact in and of itself.
Yeah, but this was a significant thing. I remember this coming out. It was like hyped up a lot until the word of mouth came out that it was so bad.
Yeah.
And then after it came out, and it has a huge cult following, You know, okay, not a huge cult following, but it has a strong cult following for
This
what this movie is.
This can't be real. There's a fact on this. Several members of the cast and crew semi-humorously described the movie as One Flew Over the Matrix.
Yeah, that makes sense. For what the movie's going for, I guess.
It somehow dragged down two better movies to their level.
Yeah. But I don't know. That's where I'm at with Impact, is just that one. But I do feel like it's earned a 1 because of its reputation.
I can't really argue against it because we always go back and forth on what impact means. So
unless we want to redefine what impact means, and we're just
let's do that. We always do that.
Well, just in general, like, do we want to talk about impact as how it's been
positive versus negative would be
the industry
next distinction,
right? Like its industry impact, or do we want to talk about its personal impact? How much did this movie make me personally feel? Like if this movie wasn't necessarily great, but maybe it made me feel or think about something else. Maybe we redefine impact that way.
We could do a half and half kind of impact thing where it's like personal, and then also we recognize that it impacted a lot more than just us.
Right, because this movie spawned a lot of think pieces and stuff. That's why I'm tempted to give it a 1 for its impact in general with people. But if I'm talking personally for myself, this movie had only negative impact on me. It just made me feel hate and annoyance. So I would give this a very strong.
Hey, whoa, slow down 0. There, buddy. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Calm down.
I'm embracing the
Master
dark
Yoda
side.
won't like that.
So if we're talking about it that way, then this is a strong 0. If we're talking about its industry impact, I feel like, or just like its world impact, pop cultural zeitgeist kind of thing, I'd say it's a 1. But if I'm talking personal, like, how did this make me feel? That's a 0.
Yeah, and as I told you before, I watched this movie twice this week, and I almost can't remember any of it.
Right.
I'm having to, like, search my memory banks for things about this movie.
Right.
So, yeah.
So how do you want this to be a more of a
0 out of
thing?
20?
Well, do you feel like the impact category should be a more personal thing to us as individuals?
I think it should be a half and half kind of thing. So
if that's the case,
of my personal, it would be a 0. Of the professional impact, industry or otherwise, is probably a 1. So it's a 0 plus a 1.
Okay, we'll just give
it a
0
times a 1, so 0.
Well then I'm kind of in the same place. So are we rounding up or rounding down?
It would be a 0.5 then. 0.5 rounds up. It is a 1.
All right. 1 out of 20 is the score. This is our first 1 out of 20. Almost our first 0 out of 20. We were really debating it there at the end.
Yeah, really though.
But I do feel like if you watch this for any reason, which is kind of the whole point of the impact category, I think, is that there is this discourse around it, and there is this curiosity factor around it.
This people definitely can grab things from this movie.
Absolutely,
and enjoy
this movie. This has a fan base. It has an audience. Its review scores kind of average out on a lot of review aggregator sites at like
between that 40 to 60% kind of thing.
Right, kind of in that range. So there are people who definitely like this movie. So I can't dock it for that. And if you might be one of them. So if you want to check this out, check this out. It's certainly interesting, like it's different. It's not like every other film out there.
It's different.
So
it definitely is different.
That's going to have fans for it. So yeah. But anyway, that wraps up the discussion on Sucker Punch. Thank goodness.
What classic from the industry in the 40s are you going to have us watch this time?
Yes. So I'm continuing my classics trend. Kyle, last time when you told me you were picking a musical, you picked The Beatles' Help, which is, I can barely describe that even as a jukebox musical. It is technically
a musical.
They're singing music in it. True.
Yeah.
It's like music videos within a movie that are disconnected from it.
Yeah, not like Sucker Punch, though.
Well, I decided to pick an actual musical. Okay. This is a film I've not seen, and it's from 1968. So it's kind of actually towards the later end of the musical trend in Hollywood, because that really was most prominent in the 40s and 50s. 60s it started to wane a bit, but
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about the Barbra Streisand led Funny Girl.
All right.
So how do you feel about that, Kyle?
It was originally a musical. I know that.
It is a musical.
Like a Broadway musical.
Oh, yes. Well, that's just how things were. We'll talk about that next week, I'm sure, because that's the whole thing. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's discussion on Sucker Punch. Join us next week for Funny Girl, which hopefully I'll really enjoy that. I haven't seen it, so I can't say anything, about it, good or otherwise. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the movies.